Welcome. You've splash landed into this Prosecco-laden podcast, straight into the woo-woo pool with the crew of Ohm-g. We're just a simple group of tragically imperfect and highly empathic BFFs, exploring a wide range of atypical topics with humor, grace, and curiosity. This is Ohm-g. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are in kind of a silly mood, which is odd because we have a very interesting topic. Our topic is actually grief, and it's about making this subject more approachable. We've got a special guest. Her name is Ellie McFalls. She's an advanced grief recovery specialist with the Grief Recovery Program, veteran, hypnotherapist, and emotional freedom or EFT tapping specialist person, I guess you could call it. So that's what we're about tonight. We're going to keep it lighthearted, but very informative. You are listening to
Ohm-g, the podcast. Welcome back, y'all.
Absolutely.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Okay.
So welcome, Ellie.
Cool.
Yes, we're very excited to have you at our table.
Yes, we are.
And I know that Rosalie, Camille, and myself have all had the pleasure of working with you. So we can share our experiences as well as hearing about what the grief recovery method is, how it works, how it helps people. And so let's dive into it.
I know, because I'm super interested, because I've been feeling for a while that this is a topic that I personally need to do some work on. So I'm super interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah,
Cool. So let's rip the Band-Aid off and get started.
let's do it.
Okay.
Glad I've had a little Prosecco for this.
Band-Aid ripping?
little numbing going on over here.
because grief and alcohol.
Obviously.
So starting out with just a general question, what is grief?
Grief is anything that you wanted different, better, or more. Think about that. Anything in your life that it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. I wish that could have been better. Why didn't I have more of that? And we suffer over the loss of that.
Mm-hmm.
If it could have only been that way. But most of the time, we don't look at that as grief or loss,
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
right? But it gets stuck in our body that way. And grief is compound. Grief compounds. So the more that happens, the more you feel.
And so many people think grief is about losing a loved one, period. Right. But there's so much more to it. Can you give us a few examples where grief just pours out of people and they might not recognize it as such?
Sure. Divorce, that's probably the big one. Of course, the number one is is death, of course, of a relationship, of a person, of a pet,
Yeah.
which is really important, because grief is emotional and not intellectual. When your heart is broken, it doesn't know where it comes from.
Right.
It could come from a pet, or it could come from a relationship, or it could come from loss of health. It could come from a diagnosis. It could come from moving, from being an empty nester. You know, the minute they leave the house, it's kind of like, now what do we do?
Well, and that's what you hear a lot of times is, my head knows such and such and this and that, but my heart isn't ready to go there.
Bingo.
Exactly. Loss of youth. I just had a kind of important birthday, and I'm going, oh my, this is what it feels like to be this old.
To us, Brenda Sue.
I'm just saying that hit home.
Yeah,
for sure. That hit a nerve with all of us.
Yeah.
Except for the young people.
I don't know. I know you're going to be like, oh, there are a lot of people at home scolding. Okay, and here at the table as well. But 30 is coming around the mountain when she comes, and set in return and all that. But that's sort of
right.
hitting me in a way of like, your 20s are almost gone, and
it's important that you just said that, because it's how it is for you.
Right.
Not how it is for me, right? Because 30, I'm like, oh, would I like to do that again?
Right.
But I'm not sitting in your shoes. So 30 for you is an important event.
Right.
So I get it.
Well, and 30 hits some people differently.
Oh, yeah.
And for some people, 30 was no big deal, but 40 really changes the perspective. So it's different. It's different for everybody. I know 30, I was like, I'm not in my 20s anymore. I don't have an excuse anymore. Like now I'm taken seriously. Now I'm an adult, right?
Exactly.
But 40 was a whole different topic.
Right.
It will take more than Prosecco.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
Definitely.
Of course, then there was the pandemic, right? And we're
collective grief.
forced to be isolated.
Loss of freedom.
Loss of freedom. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what about symptoms? Because a lot of people are going to say, oh, I'm grieving. I'm going to cry a lot. I'm going to sleep a lot. What are some different symptoms that maybe people don't quite hit with?
So there's being incredibly angry and hostile. There's that. There's the sleeping, being depressed. Sometimes we just think we're depressed for whatever reason and don't realize that we're grieving. So staying sick. Someone who stays sick all the time, that's secondary gain. That's kind of how it shows up, is not being able to cope.
So
sorry, Chandra.
Go ahead. Could that also be like the in a hypochondriac kind of situation of like talking myself into being sick just for like attention or the attention of what that sickness will bring?
Avoidance.
True.
Yes, exactly.
So this is Brenda here. And I know whenever I was living in Sweden and I was really unhappy, I didn't know I was depressed because I'd never used those words before, but I was sick all the time. And I didn't have any words to put to it. I just knew I couldn't stay there because I felt like I was going to die.
Right.
So I don't know was I grieving loss of my life I had before?
Well, being sick also has it so you don't have to cope with your situation right now.
Okay.
So if you weren't able to cope with where you were because you hated it, being sick gave you something to
focus on.
It's like a distraction of the...
Wow.
Yeah, and it's an inner expression of how you were feeling.
I just had a moment.
Good.
Wow.
An Ohm-g moment.
Exactly.
That was really profound.
Yeah. Actually, that is called a stirb. And we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
You were actually stirbing.
Disturbing, y'all.
You were disturbing.
Is that a dance?
You could make it so if anyone could.
Yeah.
We've already had a little dance party, y'all. It was quite interesting.
But yeah, I do remember the Sturbs. Having gone through Ellie's program, and one of the weird things is, I'm just going to touch really quick on kind of how I found Ellie. But I know just like everyone sitting at this table, she is one of the reasons that I was called to come to the Triad area and pick up my life and move here. I knew that I needed to be in grief counseling, didn't want to go through that, go visit a psychiatrist, whatever. The thought of having 10 sessions before getting to the heart of it just made me want to retch. And I couldn't go there. So I found her card somewhere. It had a little butterfly on it and I stuck it in my wallet. Oh, grief recovery therapy. I could benefit from that. And I ignored that card for several months in my wallet, just like I always do. And then one day I'm at this really cool woo-woo shop locally. They have all these business cards stacked on the counter. Someone opens the door and a wind comes in and all these little cards go tossed into the air. One lands on my foot. I pick it up and turn it over. Would you like to guess whose card that was?
Wow. Yeah. Spirit sending you messages, girls.
Wow. Yeah, that was Ellie's card. And I think I called the next day and helped me tremendously. For one thing, I no longer fear death. And I know that visiting her and going through her program was part of it. Have definitely recommended it to other people. And I can't say enough about it. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted her to be here. But back to the points that we're trying to make here. Talk a little bit about grief and guilt.
Well, usually a side, we call it a side symptom effect. Thank you, is guilt. But if you look guilt up in the dictionary, it's harming someone on purpose, right? It's actually, it's right here on my paper.
It's actually right here on my paper.
It's intentional harm is what it is. And if you think about it, did you intentionally harm the person? Probably not. And are you intentionally harming yourself? Probably not. So we use the incorrect terminology as I feel guilty. If you could say, and think about it, I feel disappointed that happened. Mm-hmm. Instead of guilty, it takes the blame away from it. Because it's almost like you killed them. Or you did this to like make the situation. You're in the blame and the fault. And actually you're not. So if you change that word to disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is Alexandra. I have a question. When people talk about survivor's guilt, like in an accident, is that actually like survivor's disappointment? Like removing the word guilt would help them?
Right.
Survivor's grief, actually.
Survivor's grief. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because they had nothing to do with it. But they take it on as if their subconscious takes it on as if it's real. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too.
And we all know of some story where someone suddenly lost a loved one and beat themselves up because the last thing they said to them maybe was in anger or was not loving enough, or they neglected to say, I love you on the phone. Mm-hmm. So I think that plays a big part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. And if they could feel disappointed about that instead of guilty about that, just think of it. Just feel the way that feels in your body when you say that.
Well, and to the person that you are grieving has already transitioned into spirit. That thing no longer matters to the person. So it's almost like to me in my mind, it's like akin to cutting yourself. It's like you're harming yourself when that person has even more than doesn't really care about that, like has no perspective on that particular feeling anymore because they're in the spirit realm. So it's not even in their vernacular anymore. Right. And when we experience a loss here, we so tend to forget about that aspect of it. We should really be happy for that person because they've shed all of the crap and the emotional stuff that comes along with being in a human body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. But we use it against ourselves.
Exactly.
Right. And they're free. So they've stopped doing all that. We're the ones beating ourselves up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So be disappointed instead of guilty.
I like that.
Actually.
And this is Brenda again. But what if that person is still on the earth plane and we are experiencing that same feeling? Changing the word from guilt to disappointment takes a whole level of energy. Like it goes from being guilt down here to, disappointment can be a little bit of a higher vibration, I think.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have to feel that heavy, deep.
Exactly. The deep separation or constrictive.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way you put that, Brenda Sue.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm here for, girl.
Excellent.
Putting things.
Putting things in their place.
Putting things right.
Okay.
Good.
So next point we're going to hit on. What causes us to grieve?
Disappointment.
Obviously.
Loss. Lots of that in life.
Well,
loss causes us to grieve.
It does, and physiology. That one.
She's barely even had any Prosecco.
I'm going to explain that. So how we react in social settings is pretty hardwired to our nervous system. So the nervous system regulates functions that happen in our body subconsciously, like breathing and how fast our heart beats. Mm-hmm. And it does that without us thinking about saying, okay, breathe. Okay, make your heart beat. It just does that automatically. All these things happen in our body all the time without even thinking about it. Yep. So when we feel safe in our social settings, like here, it's a pretty safe place, right? Our muscles are relaxed. We're feeling good, safe to play, safe to have fun, right? And so what happens is our breathing coincides with that. We breathe easier and our heart beats better. So, but when something happens, a trauma, like if somebody came in and if I threw this book down, everybody would just automatically jolt, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever there's an accident or something, a trauma, and it doesn't have us feel safe in that moment because it's jarring. So automatically our nervous system goes back in that second to not feeling safe. It could be something like an accident, something like somebody bumping into our shopping cart in the store. It can be that benign. But once we encounter this disruption, this threat or trauma, our sympathetic nervous system engages in fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard about this. Our heart beats, faster, breathing speeds up.
Adrenaline.
Yeah. And because our mind doesn't know the difference between reality or fantasy, all it does is react.
Right.
It just reacts without any judgment at all. And it can be an action that comes towards us like a car or a thought, just a thought that puts us on edge.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Especially with online things we view.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That's a perfect example of the things that we see online and perceive. The minute it's in our perception, we're already reacting to it without even knowing that we're reacting to it.
Well, and I've even read studies of it's almost like your what is it? Autonomic nervous system can react to a perceived threat like microseconds before your body even perceives that there is a threat. So it's like your nervous system is has a preconception of the fact that
it's on guard.
Yes, that this threat or thing is going to occur.
It's saving you from death.
Yeah, which I found pretty interesting.
Exactly.
Which isn't real. I mean,
exactly.
Death is real,
perceived.
But perceived death.
So once a threat becomes too much to bear, our dorsal vagus leads us to shut down and immobility. That's the response, is to shut down, back away. It's like a potassium.
Potassium.
It's not even potassium.
Don't eat a banana.
I went to high school with her.
It's like a possum. It's like a possum pretending to be dead to avoid an invader. It works like that.
Mm-hmm.
Instantly, it shuts down. Or the fainting ghost.
The ghost?
Yeah, the ghost. I've had 2 sips. Really. It just cut me off.
We're a shady crowd, and you know this. So,
okay, let me
It's the end of the week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So our heart rate drops, and then we're pretty much unable to express emotions. It kind of looked like what I just did. So we stutter, and we can't express our thoughts.
I have to ask you a question, Ellie. Are you having a trauma here?
I'm traumatized in this moment. Can you tell? And I'm being a perfect example.
We gave her a beverage.
I know. We did what we could.
Yeah. And bingo, we go into grief.
Don't grieve about this session.
Yeah.
It's so funny because when you were just discussing a minute ago about, that automatic where we feel something and it takes over our body and our mind is there. The flip side of that coin might be something like manifestation. Mm-hmm. If you want that Corvette really bad, you smell the leather, you touch the wheel, you imagine yourself going vroom, and your body doesn't know that you're sitting in your old Volkswagen.
Right. Camille, excuse me. This is Brenda. Are you an old white man?
Is this your midlife crisis, girl?
I've wanted a Corvette since 1976 when I saw it out the school bus window.
Or Camel.
So the answer is yes, Brenda.
And she's not grieving not having one. She's disappointed. And there's a difference.
There's a difference.
Exactly.
And she's going to manifest that Corvette.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Aside from that was a really good metaphor.
So to finish that sentence, grief triggers our nervous system because it goes into the subconscious mode of not feeling safe. So our mind gets hijacked in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So that's why it's important to actually go through the grieving stage and to reset the system, so to speak, which is what you did and you did.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not something you can go around. You have to go through it.
We've said that on several episodes before is like you can't bypass the emotions. The only way around it is through it. You have to feel it and process it and then move forward from it. So.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And somebody has to hear you.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be heard.
100%.
You've got to be heard.
So can I interject here?
Yes, please do.
This is Brenda again, because I got a lot to say.
Do it, girl.
So I did this with Ellie, and I was really surprised for the person that came up for me that I needed to work on my grief recovery with. And it was really hard. I mean, it was really good work, But it was really hard for me to have that realization. And I'm feeling emotional talking about it right now. That the person that was had affected me the most was somebody that I really loved and admired a lot of things about that person. So during that process, I actually, how long has it been since we did our work? Was it in the spring, early spring this year?
It's less than a year.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. It was less.
So that I will say for myself, that relationship has shifted, and I have been able to be more open in conversation with that person, and they have been very receptive to what I had to say, which is totally against like their belief system, but being receptive to who I am. I've been able to have those real conversations, which has been really healing for me, that they would listen to me. Where before it was like, don't ask, because I said.
You feel like that shift happened because of the way you've processed and what you're bringing to that conversation.
Right. And also I saw that relationship for what it was, not for this exalted position that I had put that person in, but what it actually was in reality. And there's still a lot of love. There was always a lot of love. But, we're all affected in different ways by our relationships.
Well, then that goes back to the disappointment, because if you're not expecting this exalted situation that's never going to be reality, then you don't stay in a perpetual state of disappointment.
Right.
That every interaction doesn't, quote unquote, live up to that perception that you had.
Oh, she's changed her whole perception, though. She had an identity of X. And this person was Y. And by the time she did the work, she shifted that they were both X's or both Y's.
Right.
Right. So she put herself back in a synced up position.
Yeah, because you see,
and her responsibility for it too.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
To see that person and where they are and why they are where they are. And be able to have compassion for where they are because of their life experiences. So just because of that one relationship that we worked on, because we just worked on one, I got a lot more to work on.
We all do.
But it gives me compassion for everybody else around me because I can see, okay, well, maybe they were coming from that place.
Right.
Maybe they had this experience. And so that's why they responded in that way. But I don't have to respond to that. I can respond from a different place of compassion.
Right.
Hi, this is Chandra. Brenda and I would like to invite you as part of our podcast community to join us on either Facebook or Instagram Live each Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern U.S. time, where we give free oracle readings for fans of the show. Just follow us on our Ohm-g podcast Facebook or Instagram page. You can post or DM us your questions there each week with the hashtag woo-woo-wisdom, and then tune in at 11 a.m. each Friday on our page to watch your free reading. If you can't join us live, don't worry. You can always catch it on the replay. This is just our way of saying thank you for being part of our woo-woo family. Hope to see you this Friday.
So, Ellie, I have a quick question, another question for you. How often, and I guess how long, do people kind of stand in their own way? Even if they say, yes, I want to work with you, I want to go through grief recovery, is there a rough average of time where they're kind of getting in their own way of their progression through it? Kind of like, oh, I want to work on it, but I don't really want to work on it.
Well,
is that common?
It's a 7-week program, and every week there's work to do. So they're working on it week by week.
Okay. It's not like sitting there for 5 sessions going, I don't really want to talk yet.
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, you can throw the book across the room and scream, but you still have to work on it.
You still got to do the homework.
Yeah.
Or you can decide not to work on it, but you paid all that money and then you're not going to work on it. So, it's up to you.
You're still going to pay me, so.
Yeah, exactly. exactly.
Ellie going to get paid.
I'm going to get paid. And you willingly came in there. I didn't force anybody. I'm not twisting anybody's arm. Never do that. There's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. Look, this is what happened, and we gained an identity over it. Yes. It's like if I say this person's a jerk, I can't treat them like anything but a jerk because that's how I see them. But if I can go through this process and say, oh my gosh, all this time I've been calling this guy a jerk, I'm responsible for that. I'm the one that put that in place. So I can apologize that go, wow, I'm really sorry. I've been calling you a jerk in my head, for 15 years. And I apologize for that. That just, that everything falls after that. So, you can here's jerk and you can apologize. And now you have the freedom to put something else in there that works.
Yeah.
But once we see that right now, we don't see that we're doing it.
Right.
But once we do see it, then it's kind of like, oh, I've been doing that.
Once you can relabel that as like, oh, that's a wounded person, or that's then it brings the compassion.
And it's us too, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. There isn't anybody in this world that's not wounded in some way.
Exactly.
Preach.
Yeah. So
unless you just came out of the womb.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
But you're wounded. That was Aaron, by the way.
I can't touch that.
Credit where credit is due. Thank you.
I can't touch that one.
Well, I have to say that one of the unique little hallmarks about going through this program is the reciprocity, and I hope I'm saying that right. It's not just you going blah, blah, blah about your own stuff. Ellie comes back at you and kind of guides you through her own experience as well. And I mean, there were times when I'm like, oh my gosh, give me a Kleenex because, I'm crying for you too.
Right.
But it helps so much to bring everything full circle. And that's something I found so unique about the grief recovery program that you probably wouldn't get sitting with a therapist for 20 sessions before you really get to the core of everything.
100%, Camille.
Yeah.
100%.
Which is, that's wonderful because I have gone to several different talk therapists before, and I had a really, really good one, and he ended up resigning and is no longer, a therapist. But when I would kind of, speed date other therapists, that was something that I told them that was really important to me, was to kind of share anecdotes from their own life. Like, you don't have to get super personal with me, but just, be able to empathize. And I don't know, there's just, for me personally, there's that connection. Be a human, right? Instead of just being like,
on the wall.
Right.
Yeah.
And, the folks that I went to, that wasn't really the case. And so it just never ended up clicking. So I think that that's a testament to you as a person, but also the work
grief,
you do.
Well, it's set up that way. Thank you. I appreciate it. But it is set up that way.
Right.
Grief has to be shared. You cannot grieve by yourself and have results. That's why we spin in our head and never get anywhere, because we're not in a good neighborhood that gives us answers.
Right.
So you have to do your loss and grief with another person. You have to have the communication between. I just can't sit there and listen to you, so I do the homework first, and then you do the homework after that. And it does give people the space to go, wow, she's human too.
Exactly.
And that, look at the crap that's happened to her, and she's still alive and kicking, right?
Not sitting there judging me or it's the reciprocity without a doubt.
It kind of gives them permission.
Absolutely.
To feel the feelings up. And that, because sometimes when we get into that cycle, we get in our own minds and feel like, I have to be the only one. Like, normal people wouldn't feel this way, or normal people wouldn't look at this situation the way it's affecting me, but to watch someone else go through the exact same thing, it creates a lot of permission.
And also, I can't tell her that, or this is like, I can't tell her that, or yes, you can. And that's where you heal, is because you actually put it out there and then do the work around it.
Right. If this group had $1 for every time they said, you're going to think I'm crazy when I say this, and then realize, no, you're not going to think I'm crazy.
Mama could retire early in someplace nice.
Really nice.
Okay. So next question is, what are some pieces of misinformation about dealing with loss?
Okay. The first thing people will say to you, oh, don't feel bad. That happens to everybody. Well, it makes me want to throw up, because how can you not feel bad when you're sad, right? It's like me telling you a joke. Now, don't you laugh.
Right.
Don't you laugh. Don't you dare laugh, because I'm telling you a joke.
Well, and the first thing that sends somebody into resistance is telling them how they should feel about something.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
We get into that, girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the quickest way to put someone in resistance.
Yeah, don't feel bad. Right. The second one is replace the loss. So that's misinformation in that, my personal example is I had a book, we'll pretend this is the book that my grandmother used to read me all the time. And somewhere in one of my moves, it got lost. And, then somebody said to me, oh, just go buy another book. And it was like, that has nothing to do with the book. And it's got my grandma's juju all over it, and the way she used to read it to me and I used to hold it, So don't tell me to go buy another book.
Right.
You can't replace the loss. Now, you can get another dog, but it will never replace the dog you just had. No, even a bicycle. You can get another bicycle, but it will never be the one that you had before.
Right.
So when people tell you, oh, just go get another fill in the blank, you have my permission to give them a dirty look.
Those are fighting words.
The next one is grieve alone. I remember another thing I can tell you is that my grandmother died, and my father and I were sitting in the first pew in the church, and I started to cry. It was my grandmother. I loved her. And my father goes, don't you sit here and cry. And I went, what, snot running down my nose.
Right.
Like, how do I not cry? And he said, you go home and get in the closet and close the door, and then you can cry in there. And that doesn't work. You've got to be loved and held and supported and talk to people and have people get you. That's what this is about. People get you.
Well, and that's another thing that I have found, like even through meditation and things, is when something affects you and you don't deal with it in that moment, and then you go back and try to get back into that place to deal with it later, you can never really get back that particular feeling or that particular reaction. And so when you don't deal with it, you're not allowed to deal with it in the moment, your body's going to store that because you're never going to be able in your mind to get right back to that,
right,
to that exact place and that exact feeling, that exact emotion.
Yeah, it's a different time. It's gone.
Right.
That now moment is no longer now.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you. Is it possible to process some of these small disappointment, grief moments in the moments that they happen, or do we need time to process them in a longer span of time? Like, say I want to go away to the Bahamas next month, because I do. And,
She said she got paid, y'all. Nobody's surprised.
and that doesn't happen. And say that's really important to me. How do I process that in the moment to release that disappointment that could turn into a grief that I can't do what I want to do?
Right.
I mean, that's something very simple and small.
Well, I think once you do this process, I think you kind of feel the way it feels to let things go, right? And you then start to practice of letting things go, and you get quicker and quicker and quicker. And if you can't, then write the letter. I mean, if you can't, then do the long process. Call me, because you want to call anybody who's done the program, because you want to say it out loud and quickly process it, and it can be gone.
So, in summary, I'm just going to say, it's really good to do this program at least one time to work on one thing. And then if you want to keep, maybe you need someone to help you, like coming several times if you have several really heavy things. But at least that one time, so you get the tools in your toolbox to figure out how to process the grief process.
Right.
And how vast that process is. I mean, it's not just, I think people think death. Always they think death.
Oh, yeah.
But how to process the little grief.
Right.
The small griefs.
Right. Well, most people do their mother and their father because that's where they've learned. That's where we learn all our habits from. And then majorly, you can do your husband, but we usually suggest mother, father, because that's where it mostly comes from. You get also that how important things are. After you do this for a while, it's kind of like you can let things go faster because you've been exercising your muscle,
right?
And you know how quick it go. I mean, sometimes it takes longer to process what you want to, but for the most part, okay, so I can't go to the Bahamas, got it. And you can move faster. But and then also we'll show you how long do you have to wallow in it and suffer.
Right.
Yeah.
And it might be showing you that.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to do this one in 10 minutes or pick a week or, and then I'm going to move on. You'll learn to do that because this is really a muscle.
It is. It's powerful.
Yeah, very much
100%.
Well, and I have a question too for you, Ellie. This is Aaron. So for folks at home listening who may not live, in this area or in this state, is it like a program that has to be in person, or do you do like Zoom or online kind of calls with them so that they can kind of talk through what they're going through and kind of work through their grief with your program, but from a distance?
Something that can be done virtually instead of.
Thank you for asking that. Yes, I've actually been certified to do it on Zoom virtually.
Very cool.
That's how I did mine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because it was during the pandemic.
So I can do really anywhere in the world as long as you speak English, because that's all I speak. We can do it over Zoom. And it's HIPAA, and it's all that stuff, and it's secure and it's safe. And I can't record it, which is okay. Right. But we can definitely do the sessions.
I guess the person could record it themselves if they wanted to have that feedback for themselves.
I've signed papers not for any recordings to be out there because it's HIPAA. It's against HIPAA. So I have to be careful.
Gotcha.
But I mean, you can't record it live in my office either.
Right. That makes sense.
It's the same. Yeah.
And my mother actually went through this program virtually. And
she did it both ways.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. She started out by visiting here for a few sessions and completed it virtually. And I was so against the virtual thing. I was like, my mother cannot do technology, y'all. This is not going to happen. And it worked out very well. And she and Ellie are friends to this day.
Yes.
So
love her. Yeah.
It was a good thing. Next question that we have for you. What are some things, I love this part, what are some things you should not say to someone who is grieving over losing a loved one?
Preach.
Well, because grief is emotional and not intellectual, there are very many well-meaning comments to appeal to the intellect, but dangerous. So the first one, no. Don't tell people you know how they feel.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. No, I get goosebumps saying that because, somebody just tell you that? You don't know how you feel. Unless I crawl inside of your head and go into your brain and start, manipulating synapses and all that. I absolutely do not know how you feel.
It's not a magic school bus moment. She's not Miss Frizzle.
No, she's not.
Shrinking that bus and going into your head.
Cheers to Frizz.
No, it could be that your father died and my father died. We can share that experience. I have no idea how it sits for you. I know it sucks for you because it sucks for me. And you know what? It still may not suck for them. I'm just even assuming that it sucked for them. It may not. Somebody be going, yay, So we don't know how it is for them. And we can't even pretend to think that we know how it is for them.
Right.
So we have to let people have their own experience. So one of the things I say in cards, when I send somebody a sympathy card, is I never, ever, ever write, I can't imagine how you feel. Or I do. I say, I can't imagine how you feel. This is just, I've had a friend lose 5 of her relatives. Two of them were her children. And after a while, it's like, I don't want to send you another sympathy card. I mean, you just have to be as honest as you can. And I just can't even begin to put into words how this can be for you.
And there are so many things that you should just never say. And the one that stands out for me is, can you imagine having lost an infant child and someone walks up to you and says, you and your wife should be grateful that you can have other children or you have other children? Speak to that, because I've heard it.
Oh, it gives me goosebumps. And you have my permission to punch them. It's just so insensitive that people come from their intellect instead of their heart. And if they would have thought from the heart, they just never would have uttered those words.
And they mean well. That's the crazy thing.
And they mean well. They do mean well. But
and to think of what if someone had said that about, what if you had been that child and someone had told your parents, well, don't grieve that person because you have another child. I mean,
like they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
Do you have something that you would recommend to people to say to somebody who's grieving, even if you yourself, whoever's saying it, doesn't really know how to respond? What is a good response to somebody or to help them meet them with compassion?
A lot of times it's just, I'm sorry, go to reach. And if they want you to take their hand, they'll give it to you. If they don't, then just stand there and listen. Mostly just listen. They're so raw. They just need to mutter something. Just listen. And I'm sorry is about the most you can say. I can't imagine how this is for you. I'm so sorry.
Just the offer of being present for them in that moment.
Perfect.
Here if you need me.
Yes.
Or even like something that I heard one time in a TED talk kind of about grief and empathy was, I don't even know what to say right now, but I'm so glad that you shared that with me, and just know that I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
That's nice.
I thought was really helpful.
Yes, very perfect.
And I don't know about other people, but sometimes in moments in other people's grief or my own grief, I think of all the things I shouldn't say, and then I get stuck on, okay, well, what do I say?
Yeah.
So this is really helpful to, have some things in my, back pocket in those moments. It's like, okay, I can know some things to pull upon and say it with feeling and compassion versus the don't say that.
Right.
The other,
And therefore looking like you don't care because you don't know what to say.
Right. The only thing I'll add on to that, and this may seem counterproductive, is that if people are crying, unless snot is running down their nose, do not hand them a Kleenex.
Oh, yeah.
Because it sends the signal to stop crying.
Mm.
And what a person needs to do in that moment is cry. So if you just, hold them if they want to be held. Because sometimes when you touch them too, they will also stop crying. Mm-hmm. And you really do want them to cry.
I just thought of a tissue as like the socialized version of your dad jabbing you in the ribs.
Yes, exactly. Not right now.
Finish this up.
Like stop crying.
That's making me uncomfortable here.
That's exactly it. Because it makes them feel uncomfortable. They will want you to stop. Perfect.
Well, I'll say I was at the funeral home this week. My uncle passed away, unfortunately, and he was really kind, good-hearted man. So shout out to JD Van Cannon. Oh, he was a really good man.
To JD.
Cheers to JD.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this woman was there. I don't know who she was, but I don't know why people say this. I know she meant well, but she came up to me and she said, "He looks so good, doesn't he?" And I was like,
in the casket.
I was like, girl, he looked dead. I mean, why do people say that?
It's so weird.
Because they were taught. They were taught.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yes. That's what they've always heard someone say about.
Heard.
I think one thing that you taught me as well is when you go to hug someone, you're not supposed to pat them on the back because that's like, okay, enough of this, get off of me. And that is such an ingrained habit.
Yes.
You think you're patting them like a baby, but really you're like, yes.
Mm-hmm. I always say, stop burping me.
I catch myself.
I say that all the time. Stop burping me.
I catch myself. So thank you for that.
Embrace somebody. Embrace them.
Hold them.
I wonder if that comes from our own need to feel to do something so that patting is versus just meeting with it, just stillness kind of that space.
And probably our own discomfort.
Yeah.
Of like, I don't know how to respond to this. So I'm going to
this is bad. Well, that's what we do to little kids. We pat them.
Well, and two, that's what we do to ourselves to soothe. Like when you get the anxious, the first thing you do is like pat your own chest or wring your own hands, or to me, it's almost more like a self-soothing action than it is a action of soothing the other person. Maybe that's just my own craziness. But
I like it.
It's not crazy.
I gladly share my crazy.
You're allowed to be unique.
I think that's valid.
Yeah, very.
Resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier we mentioned stirbing. Get into that a little bit.
Okay. So stirbs are short-term energy releasing behaviors.
Y'all got that?
Short-term energy releasing behaviors. Stirbs.
Okay.
And what a stirb is when anything you use to avoid and escape what you're feeling. Okay.
Puts down my Prosecco.
Yes, that could be one. So a few of them are, it's not that one.
Watching TV.
A few of them are
watching TV.
Eating, yes, binge watching TV, eating, smoking, drinking, drugs, TV, reading, shopping, video games. You're going to run out of fingers soon. Sex, work, anger, staying busy, texting, cleaning, driving, sleeping, exercise, talking on the phone, needlework, computer, Facebook, and all this leads to isolation. Now, this doesn't mean if you do that, you're disturbing. It means if you're obsessive with it.
Right.
Like if you spend the whole weekend sitting in a chair, binge watching TV, not doing anything else, completely texting and on your video games, you just want to notice, is there something I'm avoiding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's all it's for. It's just to notice, what is it that I don't want to face or get in touch with?
I'm glad you said that because I was about to vow to stop exercising. So, so thank you for putting it in context.
Me and you both, sis. New Year's resolutions.
We would need to be doing that obsessively, and believe me, Camille, you and I both. We're not. There's no danger.
I want to clink on that. All right.
Anything in moderation is perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's behaviors if you decide to say, hey, I'm going to set aside a weekend to, I don't know, have a movie marathon, and this is what I've set up to do. That's not disturbing, but that's
choosing. That's choosing to have a good time.
Man, I'm really uncomfortable with the conversation, and I just kind of want to go on my phone or check Facebook or my Instagram feed or something. That's a disturb. That's interesting.
Yes.
Now it's something I'm aware of it. I will pay attention to.
Yes, and that's all it's for, is just to be aware of it.
And people do it with food and
girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you said that, one of the first things that I thought about was like ordering coffee at a coffee shop or Starbucks or somewhere, and just folks waiting for their order and immediately
on their phone.
Disturbing, like on their phone, like let me scroll through my email, let me go. And I have been trying within the past few months to be more mindful of that and just sitting or standing or whatever in the moment and just kind of observing my surroundings instead of getting lost in my Instagram feed or whatever. But I've never thought about that as like potentially disturbing before if you're with that discomfort of not knowing what to do.
That's such an interesting thing, because that brings up for me, it's like, have we now socialized people to stir? Like to, I don't know how to be still in a public space that I just have to do something.
I'm just going to say preach, sister, because I think we are becoming that way.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be necessarily grief, but just the avoidance of the uncomfortable.
Human connection, really.
Yes.
Well, people don't want to look at each other or talk to each other.
Well, because that can be uncomfortable to stand there with the people that you don't know and try to, and try to make a connection because you don't know these people. And there's always the fear of the rejection of, hi, how are you doing? And them giving you the up and down and going, who are you to be talking to me? That fear of rejection. So it's a avoidance mechanism. And that's what you're talking about here is this is to avoid dealing with the grief. So it doesn't necessarily have to be grief that is the emotion, but it's just the avoidance mechanism.
Right. So Rosalie here. So I think COVID made this worse.
Oh, yes.
Because we're driven into isolation. And now that we're going back into public areas, we just have lost how to be in public.
How to interact
with people. We've lost that.
Because it's always been uncomfortable, but now we're out of the practice of putting ourselves into the uncomfort.
It's been, a year and a half.
Right. And think about somebody who was already in isolation, who was already grieving, and then they walk in to get their coffee, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And they've been in.
They were like me, and they're like, yay, COVID. So no letters, please. I'm sorry. That was it was a joke. Isolation. Yes.
That was just an INFJ reaction. And I felt it in my soul. But, just to wrap this up, thank you so much, Ellie, for being with us and shedding the light on all of this. And thank you for coming into my life and teaching me so much. And just to sign off, would you like to just tell people how they can reach out to you if they'd like to work on some of this heavy stuff that needs working on?
Okay. My company name is Mastery Works Incorporated, and I'm at masteryworks@aol.com, and my phone number is 336-362-4170.
Do it. You won't regret it.
And we'll also have her information in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So that you can contact her, because I am telling you from experiencing this, and Rosalie has also had some experience with working on some things, not particularly with this method, but with other things with hypnotherapy. And it has been profound. for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Life-changing. And that's what this podcast is all about in a myriad of ways.
So consider this you standing at the checkout line at your local woo-woo shop, and the door opening, the breeze blowing, and the business card falling on your foot.
There you
Thanks
have
so
it.
much for being with us again this week. Goodbye, guys.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. Please follow and subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review. It's so easy to do and such a huge help for us. We appreciate your interactions so much. Want to join us at our table? Make sure to check out our YouTube channel and join our Facebook community. If you've enjoyed this content and wish to support us, take a look at our Patreon page. All information and links will be in our podcast description. Catch you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM. Women's voices amplified.